Awesome. All right. So, topic of the day is Local Law 97, how to find your fines and how to actually move the needle and fix it. So, does anybody, is this I'm assuming this is a topic of concern for people. Anybody have buildings that they're worried about for Local Law 97 in 2030 or 2035?
2035 for sure.
2035. Yeah, I think everybody in there's not a building in the city that's not worried about 2035. I was actually in a building that was just built last year. It has like heat pumps in every unit. I mean, like literally everything you can imagine thrown at this building, and it's on pace to get fines in 2030, which is just hysterical. But so this is
Hey, Lee, sorry, question. So are they going to be fining people now? I know we were supposed to get fined in 2024 originally, I think, and then 2030.
So there are different cutoffs. So the first cutoff is 2024, the next one is 2030, and then 2035. And each successive cutoff makes the emissions limit lower and the fines larger. So most buildings, the vast majority of buildings in New York are fine for 2030. Something like 70-80% are fine, but most buildings are not fine. I'm sorry, for 2024. For 2030, most buildings, something like 60% to 70% do have fines and will need to make changes. Does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, I thought we were actually getting supposed to be fined in 2024, but
Will
no.
be if you're above the threshold for 2024. They're just the thresholds for 2024 are not that crazy, so most buildings are not above that threshold.
Okay. Okay.
But if you want, if you have a building you're thinking about, I'm going to give a demo of how to use the city site to see what your fines are in each year. If you want, I can use one of your buildings here.
Sure. Yeah, and I think Justine was helping us with this, the end of last year. So our fine is like, I believe 67,000 and change. But it's, do you want the
Yes.
address?
If you don't mind.
380 Lafayette Street.
Yeah. Okay, great. So what I'm showing you here is this is a website, beexchange.org. This is provided by the city, and
Mhm.
they provide this awesome calculator. You can type in any building address. It comes up, as you can see, and then you click load. It shows you all of the data so you can confirm it. And you can see all of the inputs, how much electricity, natural gas, steam, oil, 2,4, etc., and then carbon on the left here. And you can change these. So if these numbers are actually out of date, you can
Mhm.
modify them. And then you click next. And this is what it shows you. Basically, it shows you what your cutoffs and thresholds are. So in this example, you're right, Christine, the building is above its threshold for 2024. And you can see here what the estimated fine is, what's happening, and then you can see over time the thresholds get more aggressive and the fines
Mhm.
get more aggressive accordingly. So this is where I would start. You can do it by carbon or you can do it by cost. It's just a different view. But this is where I would start. And it gives you a good sense of where you are. Again, most buildings are okay over here.
Mhm.
And by the way, these are based on 2023 numbers. So if you've made improvements since 2023, this might be slightly out of date. But again, you can update the data over here to reflect that. Does this make sense
Okay.
to
Y-
everybody?
And how does the fine work? Like, do they send us a bill? Like, all right, you owe 67,000 due by, December 31st. I don't know. Like, how does that
Yeah,
all work?
I think you have to hire so you have to file for local law 97
Mhm.
um, if you're part of the fine. And if your market rate, so this is a market rate building, right? Which basically means that there are fines. There are many buildings that are rent stabilized, and rent stabilized has a different pathway. It's called the
Mhm.
prescribed pathway, which is just a series of things the building has to do, and if you follow all of those things and they're filed with the city correctly, you're fine through the next threshold. But in this case, you have to file, and then you have to essentially either one of two things. One, you have to show you're making a good faith effort to address this and the work is going to be in progress this year to address
Mhm.
it, or you have to pay the fine. Does that
Got
make
it.
sense?
Yep. Yep. And we're making change. I mean, uh, our original fine was 134,000. So we've got it knocked down quite a bit,
Okay.
and we're still making more changes this year. So,
And I'm looking at the data here. You have 45,000 therms of natural gas and 6,000 of oil. Certainly using more gas if you're running a dual fuel boiler is going to help you a little bit. And then I just see a lot of electricity. I believe I did a walkthrough, I think, Christine, of the building
Yes,
at some point. I remember you had simultaneous heating and cooling going on, I think.
yes, 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 yes.
That
Because
is your culprit
yeah,
almost certainly.
yeah,
So
because we've got the, 100-year-old buildings, well over 100 years old. We've got, the old boiler with the pipes go through the whole building. So either the boiler is on or off,
yeah,
right? So, and then you have people that are boiling. So then we have to put on the air conditioner in the middle of January.
right.
And then you have people that are freezing. So yeah, but we're
It might
adding heat pumps now to all the floors and
Plastic? Huh? Plastic? Yeah.
I'm gonna mute Kenny. But yeah, I mean that's great. I mean, the one of the ways that I've seen people address this is you put in thermostats that are more centrally controllable, and essentially you like don't allow people to turn on the AC, in the winter, and you try to really address the distribution issues so that it's not you make it as little overheated as humanly possible. That alone might get you through 2024, but it sounds like you're doing more extensive work anyway,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Does this make sense to everybody? Any questions on this so far? Awesome. So this is a great tool. Highly recommend everybody use it. I'm going to shift over to how to actually get ahead of Local Law 97. And if you go to our website and you click the Learning Hub, I actually have a video on this topic. I'm not going to play the video, but I am going to show some of the measures just visually. I think that it's helpful. So we worked with a gentleman named Ralph Germain. Many of you may know him. He's one of the most senior engineers in New York. And we put together essentially a 5-step plan for most centrally heated buildings. This will not apply to every building, but most centrally heated buildings, if you follow these 5 steps, this will get most of your buildings to at least 2030 and in many cases 2035. And these tend to be the lowest cost, highest ROI 5 steps you can make to essentially improve the building. So I'm going to walk through them really quickly. If anybody has any questions, obviously jump in. And I'm doing them in order of lowest cost, highest ROI. And the reason I'm doing that in that order is that if you do the least expensive, highest ROI things first, you're basically spending the least amount of money to move the needle, and you can see where you are, and you can then progressively do the more expensive stuff. The other thing is, if you do the things with the highest ROI first, it adds money back to your budget, which you can then use over time to deploy to make larger improvements to your building. So first measure is a very basic one. If you have a central heating system, make sure it's insulated. The headers are insulated. What this basically means is if there's a heating system or you're getting steam from the city, a lot of times you'll go into the basement and there's insulation missing, or there's just no insulation on the main risers and headers. This is an easy layup. It's super inexpensive. It immediately will reduce your heating bills substantially. And reducing your heating, which is about 70% of most centrally heated buildings, Local Law 97, is going to make a huge dent towards your Local Law 97 grade. Second thing is master venting and steam trap maintenance. I see this all the time. You have a 1 pipe, 2 pipe steam system. There's air caught in the lines. What ends up happening is air builds up. The steam needs a lot more force to get through that air and to get all the way through the building, which means you're using more oil or gas to do that. This is another very easy one. There are a couple of great vendors in the city that you can use. There are many vendors, but if you need recommendations, happy to give them. But you find somebody who's really good and really knows what they're doing to properly master vent a 1 pipe and make sure your steam traps are fully working and in order. Any questions so far before I jump onto the third measure? Third are smart controls. I mean, this one's a no-brainer, using indoor temperatures, as we've talked about. Whether you use us or somebody else, like if you don't have indoor sensors throughout your building on your central heating system, you're not monitoring your energy usage, like you're going to be wasting 20 to 30%. And this is one of those measures that, again, pays for itself in under a year, and then you're making 4 or 5 times on your money. Super, super fast, easy way to get ahead of Local Law 97. So these next two measures are definitely getting into the more expensive range, but are still typically the best ROI from the measures we've seen. The next measure is hot water heaters. So if you have giant boilers that are running in the winter and they're making the hot water, that's fine. But in the warmer months, when the winter boilers are typically off, if you have to turn those boilers on to make hot water, you're basically, using a gigantic boiler that requires a ton of energy to get water hot to heat water. And if you simply install gas-fired or even electric in some cases, hot water heaters, you can keep those big boilers off. And then in the summer, you can run the much more efficient hot water heaters. This will certainly substantially reduce your energy usage over the warmer months and can give you a huge boost in your energy efficiency. It does give you a boost during the winter too, if the hot water heaters are running instead of, for example, long stretches when the boiler is off, but you're really going to get the gain during the warmer months when those boilers are completely off. The last measure is obviously the most cost intensive, but can have a pretty big bang for the buck. In almost every building, boilers are oversized. So if you get a really good engineer like Ralph Germain or there are others who can downsize your boiler because you've done all the things you need to run that boiler more efficiently, and then install a much more modern high efficiency 4-pass gas-fired boiler, this should have a pretty large impact on your local law 97 grade and score. And so again, this isn't the first thing I would do. I would do the cheap, high ROI things first. And then as you figure out where you stand, move to the more expensive items. But this is, sort of like this one, we usually say one large measure will get you through 2035. And in most cases, I think that's true. Again, not always, but in most cases. The other thing is, and if you go to this page, you'll see this, we have a tool that lets you, it's a few simple questions, and it helps you find all the rebates that are available to all of your buildings in one place. So if you want to go there and put your buildings in, you can do that. It takes about 2 minutes. And some of these measures will actually be covered by your utility. So, definitely you should take advantage of free money if you're going to be making these upgrades. So I'm going to take a break there. I've done a lot of talking, and I'm going to open it up to questions. Michael wrote, do we have access to that calculator? To the BE exchange calculator, this one, Michael, is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Yes. This is a public tool. It's available at
Oh, I
be.exchange.
typed that in and it said page cannot be found. I'll try again.
Huh. Bizarre. Let me see. I'm going to paste this into the chat here. And
Okay.
Matt, after the event, will
Oh, great.
we'll send out the link for everything, so you'll be able to you'll get it from that email as well. But I put it in the chat there. Try that, see if that works better.
Thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions from anybody on anything we've covered? Anybody have any buildings they're concerned about?
I have a question on the gas-fired hot water heaters.
Yes.
Are there actually electric heaters that are large enough to accommodate buildings? Like I have a building with with multiple gas heaters, Bosch and Navian gas heaters supplying separate hot water tanks.
Yeah.
Are they replaceable with electric models? Do you know?
They are now. In most, I mean, it depends on the building. Sometimes you have to do multiple and zone it, but in general, there are, and they're much more efficient. They're heat pump based hot water heaters. Still at a raw, just pure economic value, the gas fired water heaters are more economically efficient. The only reason I might consider the more modern heat pump ones is that the city obviously would prefer people use electric long term, and at some point they may incentivize or push people towards it. But I probably, if I were just doing dollars and cents, would put in just a very efficient gas-fired hot water heater at this point.
Thank you.
So Zoom user wrote, by 2050, we have to be fully electric. So, I mean, essentially that is what the city is saying. That I have another video on this subject, basically on everybody talks about electrification and, says that it's ready for prime time. But in reality, it's just not physically possible to electrify most buildings in the city. There are a variety of reasons on it, but like at the most fundamental level, if every building moved to was electrified on heating tomorrow, we would be short of electricity in the city by 93%. So like it's just not tenable. Also, the city is generating electricity off of gas, so you're just burning gas to, farther away from the building. And then, I've tried to do electrification retrofits on several buildings in New York City, and it's just wildly expensive because most buildings don't have the electrical capacity to support it. So you have to get a new Con Ed vault, then you have to run new wiring through the building into every unit, a new breaker panel in every unit. I mean, it's just astronomically expensive and just doesn't make economic sense, because then running heat pumps, especially air source heat pumps, is actually more expensive than a efficient gas-fired boiler on a annualized basis. So you're just paying money to lose money. So my intuition with electrification is that a couple of things are going to happen. There's a guy named Sam Altman. He started several very well-known tech companies, including OpenAI, if you use ChatGPT. And he has a famous quote that intelligence and energy will go to zero cost eventually. And I think that's right. There will be innovations that bring the cost of particularly electrical generation down substantially. I mean, you see it in solar and wind already. The cost of solar and wind goes down about 18% a year. So pretty dramatic reductions there. And in certain places in the country, those are already vastly cheaper than gas-fired electric plants. So I think, over the next 15, 20 years, you'll see the cost of electricity drop, at least inflation adjusted, substantially. And as that happens, I think there may be a case to go electric, on buildings, and more of the grid will be green, and it'll make a lot more sense. And I think then the cities will also incentivize it substantially. So if it were me, I would plan on getting through 2035 with bread and butter things, the lowest cost, most economically efficient way to get your building there. And I wouldn't worry about the electrification unless that is your most economically efficient path. And then as technology and things improve over the next basically 15 years, I think there'll be a much more obvious path towards electrification. And if you're not wasting a ton of money every year along the way and you're saving money, as a net result, you have more money to spend on those things, in 2038 or 2039. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. What other questions do people have on this subject or anything?
Lise, it's Christine, kind of to what you're saying, obviously, we're trying to spend the least amount but do whatever we can to improve.
Yeah.
So we're in the works. We're going to be converting from fuel number 4 to fuel number 2 this year. And, but then, so at what point, do we have to, are they saying get rid of the boiler, right? So it's like, do we want to spend, whatever it's going to be, 50,000 to convert from number 4 to number 2, but then next year or by 2030, they're saying, oh, now you have to use gas or electric. Like at what point does, what I mean? Like if we're going to spend a lot of money now, I want it to at least last a little bit more long term than make a change. And then 3 years from now, they're like, oh, now you got to change it again.
Yep. Christine, do you have an engineer who's done like estimation for you on this? Usually they'll do it for free because it's sort of like lead gen for them to get the like bigger projects, like if you're going to do a conversion or things like that.
We do have an engineer that we work with. I don't know that we've gotten estimations from him. I was actually going to ask you maybe to pass on Ralph's contact information.
Let me connect you with Ralph. I would have him look at your building. And here's my gut. My gut is I would do an analysis of conversion to 2 versus gas, see what the economics look like over a 2 or 3 year period. And then I would really look at, because I'm looking at your numbers and like it looks like a lot of it is electric. And I would really look at, because it's super cheap to replace, thermostats, in units with more central control.
So our electricity comes from, we have data centers here. We're a financial firm. So we've got 150 employees. Everyone has between 2 and 6 monitors. We have 6 data rooms. So that's where the bulk of it, the energy use is coming from.
Okay, got it. So you have just a ton of energy. I would still talk to Ralph, take a look at that. I would see if you can actually figure out how much the like the thermostats are running the chillers and stuff,
Mhm.
because you can't control the data center, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and ask them to leave, but like that's basically your only option. So I would certainly look at that. Ralph is a very pragmatic person. He's not a like spend a lot of money to for vanity reasons. And I would see what he says.
Okay.
And again, I would look at like look at a 5 to 7 year horizon. What's going to get you the most bang for your buck financially? And I think he'll give you a good estimation on that. And honestly, part of this, I think this is something a lot of commercial buildings are navigating, that leases long term may need to be adopted to say, if you're, an energy hog, we're going to pass some of the fine down to you because,
Mm,
there's nothing we can do. And it's not fair that like, we're paying a fine on our building because, you're growing a marijuana farm in your
right.
yeah,
Okay. All right, good. Thanks.
no problem.
Lee, I have a question for you. This is Charlie Hoppenstein.
Charlie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Good.
Good. Good. So, what about the buildings that have steam radiators? And if there's going to be a conversion and you have to get rid of the radiators for electric heat pumps, are there incentives from any organization to help facilitate that? Because this will cost a fortune of money for any building owner.
Yep. This sort of goes to what I said. I have never seen a building that it makes economic sense to convert to electric from a reasonably efficient steam system. If you're a tiny little, building like a, two-family house or something, and you have a small gas-fired boiler, like you're going to pay more every month for electric, but if you want to do it, it's not a big deal. On a building like you're describing, like any, multifamily or like commercial building, like it's astronomically expensive to do the conversion, and Con Ed will pay for chunks of it. But the problem is even if you get the cost down substantially up front, which they're not going to cover most of it, and it's millions of dollars to, you're carving holes in the side for heat pumps, you're running new electric, a new Con Ed vault, new, wiring through the building, like the monthly cost of heating with electric, because heat pumps are so inefficient in very cold weather, is higher over an annual period than running on an efficient gas-fired system. So my advice again is, in a steam system, sort of follow that 5 checklist I just showed, and Matt will send these links out later, but I would follow the checklist. Make sure you're insulated. Like, this is bread and butter stuff. It's not sexy, but it's like cheap and like will meaningfully reduce your energy usage and can get you to at least 2030, in most cases 2035. Insulate, make sure you have proper master venting and steam trap maintenance, smart controls. If you're using Runwise, great, you're already set. Hot water heaters, separate hot water heaters. And then if you have to downsize the boiler, put in a high efficiency gas boiler. That, on most steam systems, if you're doing the work to make this happen, will get you to at least 2030, 2035 in most scenarios. And then by then, the whole technology of heat pumps, the cost of electricity, the incentives, all of that stuff, the grid's going to be different. And I think it'll make a lot more sense to look at those options, in the late 2030s, closing it on 2040.
Right. So if you were to do gas, you would have to have a chimney for that, correct?
Well, if you have a steam system, you must already have a chimney, unless you're using city steam.
Yeah, no, it's steam and it's oil, but
Right, okay, yeah.
well, but so you have a chimney for that, but you need
Yes.
you need to change it if you're doing gas venting, right?
Yes, it's part of the conversion, correct?
Yeah. Yikes.
Look, its gas conversion is not like super, super cheap, but most gas conversions I've seen are vastly cheaper on an annualized return basis than an electrification retrofit.
Right. Thank you.
The only
Thank
time I would look at electrification, other than a very small like family home, is if you have a hydronic 2-pipe system. Basically, like if like my apartment has fan coil units. I try to show it to you, but it's like there's a fan coil unit down there, and we have thermostats, and there's basically a pipe filled with water that's heated by the boiler. That type of building, it's very hard in big buildings because of the electric issue, but on smaller buildings like that, sometimes it can make sense to move to water source heat pumps, which are basically heat pumps that you still have a boiler, it's still heating the water, and and you still have chillers, but instead of heating to like 160 degrees, you're heating it to 80 degrees. And then you're using electricity to use a heat pump in the unit to either push heat or pull heat out of that pipe. That can sometimes be a reasonable ROI, and I've seen that work. But the challenge there is that electrical upgrades are very expensive and you still need more electric. But that is the only one that I've seen that's even remotely close to an economically good proposition for most buildings.
Thank you for your input here.
No problem. And by the way, you're always my email is Lee@Runwise. You're always welcome. Anybody's welcome to email me anytime with questions. Also, if you're a Runwise customer, obviously you have a customer success manager. You can email them with these types of questions. We have support 24/7. You can call us. You know, most of these, you'll almost always get somebody who can answer questions generally about anything related to, you know, how to put energy in the building more effectively. Next question. Do you think landlords will have tenants pay for electric heat in the future direct with Con Ed after landlords install the equipment? So again, it's dependent on the building. This is also another area where it's crazy. The laws are basically still say that essentially landlords have to cover heating costs, which is a whole complexity with electrification. My intuition is that there probably will be changes to this because the city will realize that as tenants have more control over the heat, there should be an incentive to get them to use less of it and less electricity. Certainly, they're already sort of incentivizing through demand response programs. If you have a smart thermostat, you can connect it to a demand response program and get paid to essentially lower your or increase your temperature in the summer or lower your temperature in the winter. And as always, you know, we're here if you have any questions, and I really appreciate everybody coming out today.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Lee.
you.